Hello, loves. Welcome to Sorry Satan, the Souls for the Savior, a place where we talk about life, trauma, healing, and the strength it takes to keep moving forward when life tries to knock you down. I am your host, Carrie Hamilton, and I know what it feels like to walk through the darkness. I've faced trauma, loss, pain, and challenges that could have easily defined my story. But instead, I've chosen to use those experiences as testimony, not for just what broke me, but what I survived. Through my journey, I'll be sharing personal stories, lessons learned, and realities of healing alongside conversations that bring hope, motivation, and inspiration to those who may be suffering in silence. My goal here is simple: to be the light for those who we have lost, a voice for those who feel unheard, and proof that survival is possible even when the odds seem stacked against you. No matter where you are on your journey, I want you to know that your story matters, your pain is valid, and your future is still being written. Thank you so much for joining me. This is Sorry Satan, the Souls for the Savior, where trauma becomes testimony, survival becomes purpose, and hope rises above all. And now I turn you over to today's episode. Hello, loves. Welcome. I am trying something new here. I would love your feedback. So before I start today's episode, I just wanted to let you know the different things that I've done. First and foremost, I changed the podcast name to Sorry Satan, the Souls for the Savior. I figured I'd do something more streamlined with my book. For those who are interested in my book, you could purchase it on Amazon. But basically, I figured why not match the podcast with the book so everything is together. Trying to get my life together here. Right? It's a never-ending battle. Also, I am going to do a lot more of the podcast with voice streaming versus video. I feel that my Spotify has been off the chains versus my YouTube channel. And I also feel more comfortable doing voice versus messaging. And I think that's just because of the fact that I can't sit here and stare at myself and talk to myself. I could talk to anybody, and doing one-on-one sessions with others is obviously totally fine for me. But sitting here staring at a camera and talking to myself is just not one of the things that makes me comfortable. And I've been trying it for so long, and now I'm going into a year here, and I feel like I just avoid doing so many episodes because of that. So let's try this and let me know your feedback, because I appreciate you as always. So let's begin today's episode. Today's episode, I want to talk about being alone. I feel that this affects so many people, yet it goes unnoticed because so many have the inability to be alone. Have you ever noticed someone that jumps from relationship to relationship to relationship before even one door has closed? Some may even begin a new relationship before one has even physically ended. So do you know someone like that? Or maybe that someone is you. The question isn't why do they need someone? The deeper question that should be asked is, why are they afraid of being by themselves? Many people mistake loneliness for lack of love, when in reality, it can be the lack of safety. For those who have experienced trauma, abandonment, neglect, rejection, maybe instability during childhood, not knowing, chaotic situations, is today going to be a comfortable day or is it going to be a chaotic day? Being alone can be threatening because they are alone in their own thoughts. And that's when reality hits us, is when we are in the peace versus the chaos. Silence becomes uncomfortable during those times, and solitude becomes painful. The absence of another person is when people are triggered and old wounds surface because they never healed. What looks like love can sometimes be survival. Some people aren't running toward relationships because they found their soulmate. They're running away from feelings that they don't know how to face alone. And oftentimes, you guys, this is when you have those people that are like, why can't I find somebody good? Why do I keep finding all these losers, users, and abusers? And you guys, it's because we seek to wander. Our minds are always wandering and seeking the next best thing, the next biggest thing, everything we don't have, we want. That's how the mind works. You always want to get more, do more, be more. And oftentimes what we fall into is habits. We're all creatures of habits. And our brains do not know the difference between good and bad. All our brains know is pattern and recognition and consistency. This is why someone that, let's say, wants to start working out and go to the gym, you have to be consistent with going to the gym because you're training your body and you're training your mind a new pattern. Because they don't know if the gym is good or bad. Your body just knows what you're telling it is good or bad. This is why, on that flip side of it, drug addicts, they can't just walk away from the drugs because their body and their mind have now programmed on how to function with the drug. So it has to be consistency. It has to be doing habitual things to keep you in a new form of comfort. And the mind is what controls us for safety. So if the mind is in a situation that it is unfamiliar with, it automatically wants to draw you back to familiar places because that is the pattern it knows, and that is what it understands as safety, even if it's a bad situation. If it's something that it knows, then that's where it wants to go. So that is why when you are finding yourself in bad relationships over and over and over again, it's because you are veering towards comfort and you are veering towards the pattern that you know so well. And a lot of times this stems from your childhood. If you had a jerk of a mother or a jerk of a father, and that is how you learned love, that is the same type of love that you are going to seek as you are now in relationships yourself, because that's the comfort that you know. Relationship jumping often becomes a temporary painkiller. The validation, attention, affection, and the distraction create relief. But eventually, when the excitement fades, the unresolved wounds are still there waiting. And that is why you have to go deep and go back to your childhood and heal those wounds before finding and seeking love. Because as I said, you are just going to seek the love that you know. And if love is a language and you don't communicate with your mind and your body what love really is, you are only going to communicate the way that you know. And that is in chaos, pain, destruction, sacrifice, and so forth. What I see oftentimes with people that are relationship jumpers is that they have abandonment wounds. A lot of times it's, the mother or the father had abandoned them and they never had that emotional structure. They were basically emotionally neglected. So they constantly seek that love and affection from someone else. I am actually a victim of this myself. The only love I knew from my father was his back, walking out on my sister and I, and only appearing when it was convenient for him, and leaving us in the hands of an abusive stepfather. So my love was chaos, commotion, and so forth. And then I got married, and I was married for 10 years. And that whole entire time, it was a very healthy marriage, but I did not feel loved because he wasn't chaotic. He wasn't drama. He wasn't, causing all this commotion in my life. So it was like boring. I felt that it was a friend. It was somebody that I didn't have this emotional compatibility with because we didn't speak the same love language. I knew chaos and he knew peace. And that is why you have to go back to those abandonment wounds, those deeper issues from how you learned what love was, and heal that and understand that you were taught incorrectly. You were taught what love is not and not what love is. You have to be alone. You have to break that codependency, because being alone is where we discover who we are without someone else's approval. It's where we learn to understand our value, and that knowing that our value isn't determined by who stays or who leaves. I know this topic personally because trauma has a way of convincing us that connection is survival, but true healing comes when we realize that we can survive, grow, and thrive even in our own company. So today, let's discuss the difference between love and dependency, and why relationship hopping happens because childhood trauma influences adult relationships, and how to build a healthy relationship with yourself first is so much more important. Because if you can't sit with yourself, you'll spend the rest of your life searching for someone else to rescue you from your own self. And that's a burden no relationship was ever meant to carry. So if this sounds like you, how do we fix this? How do we address this situation so that you aren't jumping from one person to another and you can feel yourself and start being yourself? So let's talk about it. First and foremost, you have to address the wound. As I stated before, pattern is what our brain knows and how it functions. Your brain is literally the memory software to your body. So as I said before, like going to the gym, consistency is key. Being in a diet, consistency is key. You have to start being consistent with your mind and telling it that it is okay being alone. You have to break that pattern of the codependency and needing someone in order to feel that you are whole and can survive. A lot of this comes from where love felt conditional, unpredictable, or tied to performance. Healing often requires examining those early experiences and beliefs formed from those situations. So again, it goes back towards your childhood. What happened in your childhood that made you feel that your love was only based on conditions, or maybe it was unpredictable? You didn't know if you were coming or going, or if it was a good day or a bad day. This is a lot with people that have experienced abuse, like myself. You also have to build an identity outside of relationships. Start going internal and finding your interests, your goals. Build friendships, faith, and find your purpose that exists independently, not with a partner. What kind of hobbies do you have? What things interest you? What are things that you have gone through in your life that you feel you want to do? I can give suggestions myself. Is one thing I always wanted to do was go on a hot air balloon ride. And that was what I did. There's a place like in Ottawa, Illinois that does hot air balloons. And I just went and did things that I always had dreamed of, but never did because, quite frankly, I gave an excuse. So I didn't want to, or, my kids, or, I always had some sort of reason of why I didn't do the things that I did when I could have done them the entire time. But I was codependent on someone telling me or assuring me that it was things that I could do. One of the most imperative must-dos is placing boundaries. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. In fact, it's actually a bridge to only let the right ones in. No is not a selfish thing. No is protecting yourself from good and bad, and only you know what is right and wrong for yourself. Boundaries protect actually relationships from having resentment and turning into something that could be actually detrimental to you versus helping you and discovering you. Be sure to lay your boundaries down and do not allow anyone to cross those boundaries. It is going to be one of the hardest things you do. You guys, I had to let family go, friends go. I had to let so many people go. But the reality is these people crossed their boundaries. They knew me as the old me that let them walk all over me, the people pleaser, the one that seeked their approval. So even if I were to change and not place those boundaries and finally do for me instead of for others, those relationships would have turned completely toxic. Well, realistically, they were toxic anyway, but those relationships would have never worked out anyway because it was always what I did for them and never what they could do for me. And so sometimes stepping into your authenticity and becoming your true self, it does come with a lot of goodbyes. And some of them are very painful. I have 2 very painful ones that still to this day, I try to reassure myself that it's the right decision. And it doesn't mean that you have to keep them out of your life forever, but until you're at a place where you are whole inside without having or seeking or needing one's approval, or feeling that loneliness, that is when you can then start to welcome them back into your life if it's healthy for you at that time. But boundaries are a must, huge, huge must. When going and seeking new, your identity and looking internally and becoming your authentic self, start small, like take a walk by yourself, eat a meal alone, literally start dating yourself, start enjoying hobbies. Like I said, I went on the hot air balloon ride, doing things that truly fulfill you. Do those hobbies, do things, start projects or do some projects that don't seek anyone's validation or approval. Do them for yourself and give your own approval and your own validation, and start basically patting yourself on the back, because your value doesn't increase when someone chooses you, and it doesn't decrease when someone rejects you. Your value is who you are, and you have to seek your worth and value and know it to understand that you are still whole regardless if someone wants to be with you or not. People come into your life and they either drain you or help discover you. If you are going to build this empire and become the best you, and you want to stop feeling lonely and discouraged and so forth, you have to make sure that you build yourself and find the true self of who you are. And I'm telling you, your tribe will know your vibe, and no one will ever want to change you if they are authentically for you. This is why we have to break that codependency to start becoming who you are and start being alone. Because codependency isn't love. It's what happens when survival learns to wear love's clothing. And real love says, I choose you, regardless of the baggage that you come, and you bring with. Codependency says, I need you in order to feel whole. And healing begins when you discover you are whole before anyone arrived, because you are some of the one. And what feels like destruction is God's way of discovery. It's the way of realizing that rejection isn't something negative. Rejection is protection. And when people are being withdrawn from your life or not seeing eye to eye and seeking only you for what you do for them and literally draining you, that person is not for you. And it's time that you stop people pleasing, you stop looking outside for answers, and you stop looking outside for validation. It's time that you start finding who you are and becoming the best you. And every single person, I'm not kidding you, once you become your best self and you are in your own element, the people that are for you will literally come to you like a magnet. Now, of course, my episodes are never complete unless I throw in that math and science duo in there of how the body works, basically giving the educational piece of what I am addressing. And so you may have heard of the words fight and flight. And what that is basically when your brain is triggered to know that there is an heightened situation such as chaos, trauma, danger, anything in that nature. Your brain is releasing cortisol and adrenaline, things that are putting you into that fight mode to protect you, to keep you safe. And then on the opposite side of that, when someone is love bombing or you are in an intimate situation, you are then your brain is then releasing the dopamine and the serotonin chemicals in your brain to, make the body feel good. And so a lot of times too, with the relationship jumping, is if your lifestyle is chaotic at the moment, let's say you're going through work struggles, children struggles, something in that nature, your brain is programmed to then seek that dopamine and that serotonin, that feel good. So a lot of times people seek others just for that sexual fix, for that, feel good feeling, because on the other side, it's the cortisol and the adrenaline pumping through. So if you notice during those times when you're in stressful situations, ask yourself, is my body just wanting this dopamine and this serotonin, finding this random person to make me feel good because right now my lifestyle is not feeling good? And God designed our sexuality to be like a plant. And the only way that your sex life, your intimacy will flourish is in the right greenhouse. So if you are going around and having these temporary fixes for that sexual enhancement, it's like a drug. You're basically just feeding that, fight and flight. You're giving yourself that feel good, because on the opposite side, it's, life is lifing. So you have to break out of that dependency as well. And it truly is like breaking out of a drug addiction. I remember when I was breaking my codependency, there was 2 days that I laid on my floor in my bedroom and I just cried and cried and cried. And some of it was the victim mentality. I was like, I'm not lovable. I'm a loser. I'm a this or that, just felt sorry for myself. And then the other part of me was like, I was sick. I was like, wow, this is horrible. Like you're literally going through that withdrawal. And then it was crazy because after that, like second day, it was maybe 2.5 days, I just jumped up and I was like, okay, I'm done. I'm done doing this. Like it's time for a change and I'm going to do it. And then it was like from that point on, I just kept going. And I hope that it works out that way for you. Some people need to go get professional help. It is okay to seek a psychiatrist to help you get over certain things, because sometimes we need that chemical balance because it's imbalanced, seeking that fight and flight, seeking that adrenaline or seeking that serotonin to offset, to make us feel good, to make us feel that we can function, because the brain is trying to function on what it normally knows life to be. And if you are anything like me, coming from, abusive childhoods, I needed that high and that low, that up and that down. And that's where that led into my adult life. So let's recap. Today we talked about the fear of being alone and how it traces back to childhood experiences that taught us survival instead of security. We discussed how trauma, abandonment, neglect, inconsistent love, or growing up in environments where we were not emotionally met with our needs, and it created a deep fear of solitude and led to codependent relationships. We talked about the difference between being alone and being lonely, and how many people find themselves jumping from relationship to relationship, not because they found love, but because they're trying to escape the discomfort of being by themselves. Healing begins when we learn that our worth is not dependent on another person's presence. I shared how trauma can shape our beliefs, behaviors, and relationships, but it does not define our future. Through self-awareness, faith, healing, and personal growth, it is possible to break unhealthy patterns and build a life rooted in peace rather than survival. Remember, if you cannot sit with yourself, you may spend your life searching for someone else to silence the pain. True freedom comes when your presence is enough for your own heart. Thank you for joining me today on Sorry Satan, the Souls for the Savior, a place where we discuss life, trauma, healing, and hope. Until next time, keep choosing growth, keep choosing healing, and keep choosing yourself. Love and light to all.